Hey everybody, Fight Club Hubs here. Thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about epilepsy and gaming and bad game reviews for hard games. Here more That was a great intro. Here we go. GVN Live. Hello everybody and welcome to GVN Live. If that butchered intro isn't a sign of things to come, well, let's hope things don't continue to fall apart. I am joined, as always, by Mark B. Writing and Jan. And rejoining us for the first time in almost a year and a half is Brian Dr. Dog Dawson. How are you today, sir?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. Mark? Jan?
Mark,
Why? You make me do this every week. I hate you all.
well, it's already 2 weeks,
Still, bad enough, right?
Close enough.
basically.
Yeah. All right, so Brian, it's been a while since we've had a chance to talk, to be truthfully honest. How about you let our fans that are viewing know what you do, what you've been up to, and all that other fun stuff.
Basically, my primary job is I'm a guide author for Prima Games. I used to write the physical guides that you go get at GameStop or Barnes & Noble or whatever. Now I do primarily online stuff because people don't buy physical stuff as often unless it's like a collector's edition or an art book or something. So that's my main thing. I also do a bunch of other freelance work for like Red Bull and Tetris and things of that nature. I'm a movie critic. I usually go to see movies a week or two early and tell you why I don't like them, and then you tell me why they're super amazing when they come out because you have low standards. So there's that too. For the most part, I've just been trying to find a fighting game that I enjoy. I quit Heroes of the Storm because the ranking system is really, really terrible, and I'm waiting for Soul Calibur right now.
Okay, so what was the most recent movie you saw, and you want to give us a quick snippet of your review?
I saw the Mr. Rogers documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor? I saw that last week. That was really good. I grew up with Mr. Rogers. Like, that was a lot of my younger childhood. And like that movie, that documentary, it's a lot of documentaries these days. They kind of go after the negative aspect or the controversial aspect, but that was just straight. This was Mr. Rogers. This was Fred Rogers, and it was really nice, and it kind of just reminds you, especially kind of where we're at in the world, that people like that almost don't exist anymore, or at the very least, if they exist, they're not in the public spotlight as much as he was. So, but it was very good. I don't know how much it would appeal to somebody who doesn't really know who Mr. Rogers is.
Like, we have a whole generation of kids who are growing up without him right now.
Right. It showed a lot of his older episodes, clips from his older episodes and things of just showing how impactful he was on the youth of that generation. And it almost makes you feel like you wish he was still on, or that you could just show your children some of his shows. To kind of, because he was just, there was something about him that you don't see these days, like you basically see the exact opposite these days.
Okay. So, before we begin our topics, let's talk about some brief news. Two things happened since our last episode. One was Walmart supposedly, outing Rage 2, and nobody cared. And then, of
Walmart
course,
outs a lot of games that nobody cares.
Yeah, but Bethesda's way of having fun with the leak was actually kind of entertaining. Like, telling them how to properly promote it, like box art and little pictures and drawing on all that stuff. That was kind of funny. And the other thing, of course, also coming from Bethesda was the teaser trailer for Fallout Vault.
Fallout 76.
Yeah, 76, and I'm kind of excited about that. I have a theory about what kind of game it's going to be because I know about the lore behind Vault 76.
Everybody has a theory about what Fallout 76 is going to be. Some
Well,
people said
everyone is saying it's going to be an
Ark.
MMO
Some
or
people have
something.
said it's going to be an MMO. Some people have said that it's going to be a survival horror game. Nobody knows because Bethesda hasn't said anything, and they're not going to say anything until E3.
I know.
My favorite theory is that the game opens up with you being taken to the 76 shelter, and you are forced to get on some monitor and play some PC game, and that PC game is Elder Scrolls 6, and then it goes right into Elder Scrolls 6.
That's a great one. That's great. I like that. That would be awesome. One of the theories I kind of pieced together was based on the lore about what type of game it's going to be. It's, you know, they say Vault 76 is one of the controlled vaults that was never experimented on. It was meant to open at a certain time, and it kind of opened up a little early. But it opened up, and, you know, they were cast with rebuilding. So my thinking is it's going to have online multiplayer features somewhere akin to, like, what the new Conan Exiles is like, where, like, people can group together and build and stuff like that. Kind of like a survival game / action game, you know, Fallout universe, you know, a little mishmash of everything.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of comparisons to Ark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
a possibility too.
That's the most prevalent rumor that I've heard, and I am deeply, deeply uninterested in this thing.
Look, I don't like Bethesda. You know, I don't have any love lost for that. So honestly, I just don't care.
Well, I mean, we're also supposed to getting what, Starline or Star whatever. We're getting that too. So I'm curious to see what that is. But otherwise, I don't really care about much Bethesda's doing. I'll still watch their press conference on Sunday, but you know, I basically watch it just to see the internet melt down, as opposed to actually be excited for anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is it this Sunday or is it next Sunday?
Yep.
This coming
E3 E3 officially starts on Saturday with EA, and I think the PC game press conference is Saturday. I know EA for sure is Saturday, and then Microsoft and Bethesda are Sunday. Nintendo and Ubisoft and Sony, and I want to say there's one other one on Monday, and then Nintendo is the last press conference on Tuesday, which is the day that the show floor opens.
Okay.
Yeah, Nintendo's notorious for always going last anyway, but I'm interested in seeing whether or not Nintendo decides to actually do a live event instead of a direct like they've been doing the last couple of years.
I'm sure it's going to be direct. I'm sure. Like, I would be surprised if it's not a direct.
I'm pretty sure it will be a direct because they have to find some way of introducing the new president of Nintendo to the masses in a different way. You know.
Yeah. Now you will see live stuff from them because they're having the Smash Invitational and the Splat 2 championships.
Right.
So you'll see live content. It just won't be the press conference.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the first topic of today.
Well.
Mark, go ahead.
Hold on,
Mark.
I can't believe you didn't reference the piece of news that I posted in the discussion topics. I posted it just for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, Mark. Please, Mark.
Yes, this is a thing that we need to talk about.
Yes, Mark,
Yeah.
please.
So Intellivision has revived itself as an actual company now.
Television.
Somehow.
This is
And they have officially announced their new president is Tommy Talrico.
Yeah.
The guy who makes fucking video game music.
Yep.
And let's just talk about some other crazy things. Indiegogo's website crashed, and we got ourselves a successfully campaigned Atari VCS console. What the fuck is going on in this world?
That's going to be
no.
about 6,000 disappointed people is what that's going to be.
I think it was up to 9,700 last I checked.
Whatever it is, they're all going to be disappointed, or they're just not in touch with how gaming works or how emulation works, because there's no reason for that thing to cost $300. Absolutely no reason.
So you glossed over the best part about the Intellivision thing. They're making a new piece of console.
Yup, they are making a new console. They haven't announced anything about the console, except that it is not going to be a competitor to the current existing consoles on the market.
Which
because
everyone already knew
even
as
Tommy
soon as you said it
Talrico
out.
understands that would be a horrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, like we don't know anything about what they're doing with it at this point. We don't know what the console is going to do. We don't know what the specs are going to be. We don't know anything except for the fact that the guy who made that bitchin' Sega CD Terminator soundtrack is going to be running the show. And listen, that was a rad fucking soundtrack. Like, 10 out of 10. Good shit. I don't know if I want that guy running a video game, a hardware company.
The whole company.
What I thought was really interesting is on Twitter, someone asked him if he was going to be like they were just throwing out stuff of what, because he teased the announcement before it happened, so they were throwing out stuff, and so one guy was like, "Oh, are you going to be the new CEO of Konami?" And he was like, "No, bigger." And I'm like, "How is in television bigger than CEO of Konami?" I'm like someone's ideas are skewed here on where the importance of that falls.
To be fair, in television's reputation is certainly better than Konami's at this point.
That is true.
But that's more to do with Konami's current leadership. So if you were to kick Konami's leadership out, you could easily change
probably.
it. There's nothing you can do to change how people think of in television. Like, that is not changing.
Yeah,
Who's around that can still care about in television, though?
Apparently the 9,000 people that bought the Atari. That's who.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fair point.
I would be astonished if those people cared, to be quite honest.
They're probably like 9,700 like collectors who are going to probably sell it for like $1,000 upon release.
I'm sure there's a niche market for that kind of classic console, but the way that you do it is how Nintendo did it with the classic NES and the classic SNES. Like, that's how you do it. You don't release a $200 to $300 console that you buy games for. Like, that's not what you do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, what makes you think this is a good business model? Like, okay, so your campaign is funded. How much money are you actually going to make on this? Like, Nintendo couldn't keep their stuff on the shelves. That's how much people wanted them. And Atari and Intellivision, to me, don't have the nostalgia that the NES and the SNES have. So you're not going to have that rabid demand. But if you released, say an Atari 2600 Classic with the 100 top games for that console, you would probably sell out, for like $100. I'd probably even buy one. $100, give me every single good classic Atari game. Sure, let's do this. Yep.
I don't think there are 100 good classic Atari games.
Well, 10 good ones and 90 throwaways.
Hey, Pac-Man was amazing.
And see, that's the thing. I'm like, most of the Atari games were not made by Atari. You've got Donkey Kong's on there, Asteroids is on. You know what I mean? Like, most of those games are not made by Atari.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, Nintendo also has a library of games that are made by them that people recognize as being awesome games. Atari, not necessarily so much. Like, what do you have? Adventure?
Yeah, that's about it.
They have baseball.
I mean, like, you can't even include like the stuff that people would want to see for perverse curiosity, like E.T., because that's still a licensed property.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on from this before we get too sidetracked. So moving on to our...
Speaking of having problems with playing video games...
Wow, let's make light on this subject. Okay. Okay, so...
It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, that is true.
Mark is here. Come on.
Yep. I mean, last episode, hey, we talked about hentai games for like a good half hour. So
listen. I'm not gonna make fun of people with disabilities. What do I look like? Our president?
Oh,
that is true.
Not my president.
It's fine.
Okay, so
Hashtag.
Today we are going to be talking a little bit about epilepsy and gaming and how epilepsy is kind of like affecting the enjoyment of a small few who would like to enjoy video games. We were having some problems researching this. I mean, I wanted to go have the conversation to go in a certain direction, but because the numbers that we were looking for, just for whatever reason, didn't seem to exist. Like, they didn't seem to, like, on the studies that we were looking at in terms of correlations to video games and triggers for, seizures and whatnot, numbers don't seem to exist, like, for number of reported cases or anything like that. Like, I wanted to see if there was an increase in seizures and related to video games ranging from, like, the 80s and the 90s, as graphics got more intense and, brighter and all that other stuff with, enhancements of graphics. Unfortunately, I couldn't find that, but we'll just talk about it and see how well this goes. The first reported case that I could at least find was in 1981 in regards to a recorded epileptic seizure, and I believe it was a photogenic seizure, which is usually a seizure that's usually triggered by strobing, flashing lights. That usually makes you almost kind of catatonic. I have a friend who actually suffers from that. We actually had to leave a Bon Jovi concert because the end of his concert, he had so many strobing lights that it literally just triggered her seizures, and it's a kind of a very scary thing to see when somebody gets into that kind of state. The enjoyment.
I would almost think that the older games would cause seizures more than the newer games, because the older games were more basic. So if something big happened, you would just get that flashing light. Whereas now, if something big happens, they can do all kinds of other things that don't involve flashing anything.
Yeah, that is. I would definitely see that, but you'd also have to remember. I would say, looking at like video games from back then, like the Atari and Intellivision, like those early 8-bit consoles, you can definitely see easy triggers for photogenic like seizures and whatnot. But then when you got the NES, the only real way I could see those games triggering somebody is through, let's say, like if you're playing Ninja Turtles 2 or 3 and they have sprite overload, so you have extreme screen flickering and whatnot, and stuff like that tends to disappear as more powerful consoles, were coming out with increased sprite limitations and whatnot. So, and then I would say around the mid 90s is when I think graphics took a strong turn with the introduction of 3D graphics, and then you had the fighting games that started to blow up with all the extreme flashing. Like the first time you saw a super victory in Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or an ultra attack or a super attack in, let's say, X-Men versus Street Fighter, like all these like extreme flashing strobing lights from special effects and whatnot. 3D fighting 3D action games where like games like, let's say, the Konami's light gun game, I forget what it's called now.
Lethal Enforcers?
Not Lethal Enforcer, but just light guns in general. Yes, Time Crisis. Games where they had the extreme flashing every time you had to pull the trigger, because they do that old school method of like where the screen flashes and wherever the sensor of the gun is pointing is where it lands on the. Why am I going into technobabble? I suck at explaining it too. But pretty much like the 3D era, I would say, seems to have introduced more problems for people who suffer from seizures and whatnot, and it seems, to escalate and as the years go by. So my big question is, outside of pamphlets and notes left by video game companies that you'll see at the beginning of a game, like let's say warning, this game has heavy use of strobing lights and whatnot. Is there not a possible way for video game companies to allow people to, even though they're a small majority, there's still like a good chunk of people. Let's say there's 40 billion or 40 million video game players out there, and let's say maybe less than a quarter of them suffer from seizures, epileptic seizures. Is there not a way for video game companies to make their games more accessible for these people to be able to play their games that want to enjoy them? I'm sorry if it took me so long to even get to that damn question, but let's start with our first guest here, Mr. Dr. Dog. What do you think?
I would say, I almost feel like if you suffer from that, you just don't play video games. Just like if you suffer from that, you have to be really careful about even what movies you go and see, or what TV shows you watch. So I think until it becomes a large enough problem where it starts impacting the bottom line of these companies, we're not going to, because if you look at it, you don't see hardly anything, on TV. You don't see hardly anything before movies. You don't see any of that anywhere, really. I can't think of anything off the top of my head where on a regular instance I see, hey, if you suffer from epilepsy or any seizures, don't do this activity. Like I rarely see that, and to me, like I personally suffer from motion sickness, like I can't play first person shooters almost at all, but no companies look out for me. And I feel there's a lot more people that have issues playing FPS games than there are who get epileptic seizures. And there's no love at all for any of my people, so I don't think we're going to see that. I mean, you definitely should have it because those people shouldn't have to, forego not playing games. But then I also look at it as, even when I say go to a movie that has shaky cam, a lot of people don't even know it has shaky cam beforehand. So I have to wait for somebody else to watch it. And then if they're not as sensitive as I am to it, then they say, yeah, it's fine. Then I go see it and go, no, it wasn't fine, but they weren't as sensitive, so they didn't know. So I think it's difficult to identify that without really, in the process of making it say, okay, we're going to have this flashing light here, or we're going to have this rapid series of changes here. This might cause an epileptic seizure. Is there any way around it? And I don't think that the companies, especially with video game budgets blowing up exponentially, I don't think that the companies are going to spend the extra time and money to go through that process during development. I think at best you would see maybe somebody create a website that says, hey, here's a list of games you can play that are safe. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably the best we can hope for.
Okay. In regards to, let's say, what Microsoft just recently did is they unveiled, a controller for people with special needs that allows them to play video games through various means. A really unique controller. Props to Microsoft for being ahead of the game for thinking about people with disabilities. Don't you think game developers though could at least offer, let's say, an option in the menu that would disable, let's say, certain features or special effects that could, allow a game to be very playable for people who suffer from seizures? What do you think, Mark?
Well, they absolutely could, because they've already done this. Some developers have already done this for color blindness. One of my friends, God of Zig in the chat, has some degree of color blindness. I don't know to what extent it affects him, but he can drive and function, so I can't, it's not that severe, I don't think. But he generally has to play certain games with that understood, but some games specifically that use conflicting color palettes have options that you can choose that he's pointed out to me in the process, where it takes into account that you're colorblind and changes the way that things are displayed, or puts icons up indicating a thing that you're going to pick, and so on and so forth. So it would definitely it definitely seems like it would be a thing where it would be an option for developers to include an epilepsy-friendly version of the game. I think the core problem there is, what do you change? Like, for color blindness, it's not... For one thing, with color blindness, it's an inconvenience if you don't know what color certain things are. It can make some games unplayable, but that's like the worst that it can be, depending upon how a game functions. If you're colorblind, you're not going to die playing a video game. You're not going to have a fit. For epilepsy, they're kind of in a case where, like, testing it in general is going to be a concern, is going to be a lot more work than it would be for testing a color blindness filter. And epilepsy kind of works on a scale to a certain extent. So you can't really guarantee 100% that you're going to be able to have this game be playable for people with epilepsy. In a lot of cases, the best that you can do is just say, okay, this game might cause you problems. Don't play it if you have this problem, or good luck. Because the amount of testing that you would need to do to make that work would be arduous and time consuming, and might not even necessarily protect 10-20% of the epileptic population.
Okay, so pretty much just, the testing would be really bad, and it would just cost like a fortune in order for game companies to pretty much just to develop a system that could be applied to pretty much just one game. And it
I don't
doesn't
even
mean it's-
want to say it's going to
Not
cost
necessarily.
necessarily.
well, you got to think about the health. You got to think about the cost of ensuring the health and safety of the people you're testing it on.
Sure, but you can do something that would be like a test environment. For example, you could do like some type of a test use case where you bring in 10 people and you have them sign a waiver, or you provide some kind of, because if you have like medical staff on hand and you have them sign a waiver, you're probably fine. But there's going to be a degree of expense that might not be worth it. Like, the thing is that a lot of the time when it comes to epileptic issues, a lot of the games that really have that problem aren't games like, Far Cry 5 or Assassin's Creed, whatever. It's stuff like, the newest Hatsune Miku, or the Persona 5 dancing game, or, stuff with lots of bright colors and big, bright explosions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as you say, the fact that games are becoming more realistic also means that, like, the effects that people are using to a certain extent are becoming more realistic, more reasonable. And it's kind of making it so that there are less instances where that's going to be a concern. It's also worth noting that as technology is improving, this is becoming less of a problem as well. Flat screen TVs and monitors have reduced some of the flicker that can potentially cause epileptic fits for people watching television, playing video games, etc. So it's kind of a case where, as the tech improves, there are better ways to do this sort of thing. But a lot of the games that are going to have like those bright explosive colors that might cause those sorts of seizures, they're not going to be your AAA type games. They're not going to be the games that are going to have the huge budgets where they're going to want to make sure that the largest variety of people can play them. They're going to be the games that kind of have like a niche appeal to them. So there's an investment of money involved that they're probably not going to be able to justify to make sure that 10% more of the population can play this game, which may increase their user base like 10,000 sales, right? So it's basically a case of the kinds of games that are most likely to trigger these sorts of situations are unlikely to be games profitable enough that they're going to care about doing this sort of testing.
Okay. You wanted to say something, Jan, before Mark continued?
No, you're fine. I was pretty just going to wait my turn, but so there is a bunch of science behind it, and what little I could glean was actually pretty interesting. The age of onset, so it's actually got its own style. It actually has a name for what it is. It's called video game-induced seizures, or VGS. They don't call it video game epilepsy because it's not a syndrome. It is something that can basically help to trigger epileptic seizures, but it is not something that is only ever going to happen if you play video games. It is a photosensitive epilepsy. So because of the fact that you have flashing objects on the screen, it's going to cause this problem. It does have a bit of an earlier onset between the ages of 7 and 19 within about 87% of the patients. And 2/3 do suffer from generalized seizures, and the majority of them suffer from various syndromes of idiopathic generalized epilepsy. The remaining 1/3 have occipital seizures with or without photosensitivity. So it's not always just the photosensitive nature of a video game that's going to cause the epileptic seizure to actually occur. So it's more so a combination of the actual graphics on the game and the style of monitor that's actually being used for the gaming process. Things such as small handheld liquid crystal displays, non-interlaced 70 Hz arcade games, or even in some homes, interlaced video monitors. So older CRTs, things like that, definitely had more of an impact on having VGS, whereas nowadays with LCD backlit, LED backlit LCD displays or lower latency monitors, things like that, you don't see it as much as you used to. There was a study done by the General Neurosurgery and Psychiatry Group back in August of 1994 that took 15 patients who did actually already experience epileptic seizures while playing video games across 20 separate cases, 9 of the 15 and all but 2 of the reported cases experienced their first seizures while playing video games. 2/3 of the patients had idiopathic generalized epilepsy and mainly reported generalized clonic seizures, just standard seizures, but had typical absence seizures and myoclonic jerks while playing video games, which means that while they played video games, they tended to have more reaction because of the photosensitive nature of both the games and the monitors. Now, keep in mind, this was done back in 1994, so we're still talking a lot of stuff is on CRT, a lot of stuff is still 480. The numbers seem to sort of just disappear once we get into the late 90s and early 2000s because of monitor technology changing and the way the games and the consoles themselves have increased in graphic potential. The two main problems, though, and this is the really big thing, as what you guys were saying earlier, is it possible for the game companies to actually create something in the game or a mode in the game or something with the game to actually function in some way that's like color blindness? You know, you can change the mode in most games now where it'll actually give you the ability to, you know, dichromatic or trichromatic color blindness. You can actually play the games and see everything the way it's intended to be played. The management options for VGS are avoidance of precipitating and facilitating factors. Basically, don't play the games because it's going to cause the problems if you have this anyway. There really isn't something that can be done wholly without a complete reworking of the visual interface that actually goes between here and their brain from the video game. It's something that's hardwired into the epileptic fits that they actually are going to have this happen to them regardless. They're still saying that, you know, from the information that I found, they're basically saying that there is still something that basically states that VGS should not be equated to photosensitivity alone, as 1/3 of the patients with VGS are not photosensitive. So this basically states that it's not necessarily just what they see or the bright flashing that's actually happening. It's just because of the fact that it isn't reality, it's causing these reactions within their minds that's making them have these epileptic fits. And I think that's really where we need to really sort of, if we're going to try to say, this is where we need to go, and this is how we, you know, market to this group. It's interesting to see it because not everybody that has VGS is photosensitive, so it could be other factors that are causing their epileptic fix to actually occur while they're playing video games.
Okay, so now let's just hypothetically say that all the gaming companies and other companies in the world, you know, technology-wise, manage to get together and actually create a system that allows people who suffer from epilepsy, you know, be able to play their games. You know, they have that option to turn off certain special effects or whatever in their games. And this is something Zig just pointed out. What could possibly happen in terms of legal ramifications if people started putting labels in their games and whatnot saying, now safe for epileptics to play, and let's say somebody suddenly just, you know, has one, even with all those options turned on? What could that be a big catastrophe right there for the gaming industry?
I would imagine not, because I would imagine, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I would imagine just that even if you had that label on there saying safe, it would probably have a little asterisk by it saying, you know, in testing phases, it was safe for 9 out of 10, you know what I mean? Like, they would cover their backs. Like, their lawyer team would make sure that their backs were covered on that. And if not, then as soon as it happened one time, every single time after that, it'd be covered.
Okay, well, you were gonna probably chime in, Jan?
It was pretty much the same thing. It's like it would have huge ramifications if they didn't cover their butts with something. Purely just a matter of, you know, like you said, have that asterisk on there that basically says, like, we've done the testing. Here's our results. Here's all of our findings. Everything is documented. If you have any questions, here's everything. We already laid it out. We did all of this prior to even conceptually releasing this game, telling you, yes, it's safe, but then you've got 1 or 2 people who don't read the warning labels, which is why warning labels exist in the first place. And then you end up having this problem where all of a sudden somebody's suing another video game company because something happened, and now all of a sudden it's like a big deal again. Honestly, in the long run, something like that happening is so far out that at this point I don't even think it's like a non-issue. People just don't have a problem or don't really care, and I don't mean to say that like in a bad way, but most people just don't care about whether or not their video games are going to cause somebody to have an epileptic fit, because it happens so regularly that there are people who have epilepsy who still play games and still have many fits because they want to play their games, and there's no way to not.
So pretty much in the long run, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any kind of foreseeable change in the future to, help out a small demographic of gamers who suffer from something in order to enjoy a medium that a lot of people really enjoy. I mean, a book is one thing, but being able to interact in a story is something else, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like something a lot of people will miss out on.
Well, I wonder if there's an opportunity for a third party to step in, kind of like how you have gunners that kind of help with migraines and headaches and eye strain headaches. I wonder if there's something, at least some research that could be done there to see if maybe there's some type of sunglasses or some type of glasses you could put on that would probably not get rid of that risk, but at least drastically reduce that risk. You know what I mean? So
I believe they do have something like that, but it's mainly for people who just recently got out of, let's say, LASIK surgery, so they don't suffer from the brightness of the sun or other lights from giving them intense migraines after surgery.
Right. So I wonder if you could outfit some technology like that and put it toward gaming and epilepsy gaming kind of stuff. Okay. I would say that would be probably the most realistic countermeasure for this, because the game companies don't have to do anything aside from maybe providing samples for the research. They don't have to worry about labels or warnings or anything. It's all in that third-party company, and the third-party company would do like we've said. They'd say, hey, we've tested these glasses. They work for whatever 90% of the user base. This should at the very least help, but it's no guarantee. And then maybe people that suffer from that can play, 8 out of 10 games that they wouldn't be able to play before.
Now, how would that apply, let's say, to, a Sony VR headset? Would that even be applicable?
There's something he's not going to get past. Like me being motion sickness, I can't play VR, and I'm okay with that. Right, but there are just certain things it'd probably be pretty difficult. Like you can do it, like people who wear glasses can play VR, so I'm sure it would be possible, but you'd have to, it might not be comfortable. I can say that much.
Okay, what were you going to say, Mark?
Well, it's if your VR headset can accommodate glasses, if they figure out a way to make glasses that would hypothetically allow for people with epilepsy to reduce their symptoms, sure. You can wear glasses under a VR headset. I've done it with a couple of different models, and it's fine-ish.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So pretty much I think we've covered most of what we can about the topic. Does anybody have any final thoughts they wish to share on before we move on? Mark, Jan, Brian?
I got nothing.
Nope.
Okay. On this specific topic, no, I'm good.
Okay. So, well, there you have it. Unfortunately, as we move on to our next topic at hand, I just want to say that I feel sorry for all those who suffer from this, and I wish you could enjoy the same medium that really brings us here today. So,
as I said, at the end of the day, I do think that technology is advancing to a level where epilepsy is less of a problem for people than it was even 10 years ago, possibly 20 or 30 years ago. There are going to be people who are affected, and I hope for those who have significant epileptic issues that, there is a solution on the horizon. But I do think it's less of a issue than it was years and years ago. So hopefully it's a thing that we can control long term more easily than some of the other disorders that we've dealt with over time.
Okay. Yes, I absolutely agree. So our next topic at hand, we're going to be talking about video game journalism's problem with giving poor reviews to hard games. And this was an idea that popped into my head, and I just for whatever reason couldn't get the thought out of me, and I decided to finally see if we could talk about it. This is brought on by the fact that I saw reviews for Cuphead and some other games recently that pretty much just irked the hell out of me. People giving a minimum or an average or a meh score to a game just because it was hard. It was just too hard for them to play. And there was a big topic of controversy last year about video game journalists sucking at games, shouldn't, review games or something like that. And I don't recall if we ever touched on that topic at all. I know you weren't a part of that part of the podcast at the time, Jan. I don't know if you remember at all, Mark, if we've ever did.
We talked about it briefly when Cuphead was a thing. I kind of feel like this discussion in general should be about the difficulty that the world of gaming, the gaming journalism, that the gaming media has with discussing difficulty, because I want to be clear here. I don't think the conversation of journalists giving poor scores to difficult games is a particularly big one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's particularly widespread. But I do absolutely think that we need to have a conversation about how we deal with difficulty as a concept, as a mechanical structure in games, like how journalists talk about it, how we as enthusiast type critics talk about it. Mm-hmm. Because there is a lot of back and forth discussion on different sides, and I'm probably going to be the asshole in this conversation. Let's just put that out front. I'm going to try and be as nice about this as I can, but I probably don't agree with you guys on a lot of stuff here.
Okay. So, last year there was that topic of conversation, and there was a huge backlash about, people who suck at video games should not have a right to express an opinion and write a review about, said game. And the big controversy was surrounding Cuphead because some guy said, oh, it's 2D Dark Souls. And that, you know how the internet reacts to things like that. And it's absolutely, hilarious. It'll just cause a giant dumpster fire. I am of the mind that I think that just because a game is difficult should not dock a game, the score of a game. I mean, granted, everybody is not going to be good at video games, but I don't think because Battletoads is hard as hell, you should, give it like a 6 out of 10 or something like that. I mean, you should at least have a little bit more integrity in regards to being fair. Just because it's too hard, you couldn't make it past the third stage or whatever. What do you think, Brian, since you've been around the journalistic world with IGN and a few others at the time, what are your thoughts in regards to into this topic?
Well, there are two different points of view here. Number one, you have if somebody is bad at a game or somebody sucks, they shouldn't be reviewing said game. At the same time, a vast majority of the people that rely on those reviews and even read those reviews suck just as badly at this game, whatever game it is.
Mm-hmm.
So from that point of view, I don't mind it because you're writing for your audience. On the other hand, when you get people like me, almost every single journalist that I've encountered has not been good at video games. That doesn't mean that they can't beat Uncharted or Kingdom Hearts or whatever, but it's going to take them a while. They're not going to be good at it. And I think Cuphead was a really great example because a lot of people said that game was super hard, and you saw the infamous IGN clip of where he couldn't get through the little, tutorial area. And, when I played Cuphead, and I've got a number of video guides on Prima's YouTube channel, beating the game was not difficult. It was getting A grades throughout the first run through and then getting the S grade throughout the second run through. That's what was difficult. So if you just wanted to actually beat the game, for somebody like me, that was easy. Now, I get it from a casual standpoint, that's still a difficult game. But hello, the games that I grew up with, 90% of the games on the NES were ridiculous.
Silver Surfer?
Yeah, not even going there. Like, if you just played the original Contra without that 30 lives code, good luck beating that game without 30 lives, like, on your first few runs. Like, maybe after you've done it 2 or 3 dozen times, okay, sure. But if you're a 10-year-old playing Contra, you're not beating that game in 3 lives,
Mm-hmm.
So from that point of view, I also feel that, if the better you are at something, the easier it is for you to understand the problems with the game. But then at the same time, again, it depends on what your audience is, because you can have that disconnect. Like I said, for me, if I was reviewing Cuphead, I see that it's a challenge, but I don't think it's all that hard to beat. I think the challenge comes in getting your A grade or your S grade. But the average person who played Cuphead is like, this game is ridiculously hard. I can't do it. So if I was looking at it from just my point of view, and I reviewed it saying it's a little bit of a challenge, but not too bad, people would be like, what are you talking about? This game is impossible for me. So there is certainly that market for, having people that suck at games, but can articulate that suckage, writing the review for that game. So when 90% of your gaming audience are casual players, there's a market for that. I might necessarily agree with the opinion of that market, but that market is there and far outnumbers me.
Mm-hmm. Jan, so in regards to, let's say, like what he was saying, there's a market for people who, may not be good at games, but they want to know. Now, looking back at, let's say, some of the older games, like let's look at 2004's Ninja Gaiden, for instance, a game that, people were saying was literally hard as hell. Back on the OG
the 3D
Xbox
one, right?
Yeah, the 3D one.
Okay. I mean, I can span the time. Like, I can really just span time, and I can look at things like the old original Ninja Gaiden. You can look at games more recent, like Cuphead. You could also look at other games like Prey, Dark Souls. The list could go into any number of different directions, but there is, like he was saying, there's two different groups of people. There are the people who are good at video games, who basically play these kind of games for a living, and then for a living, I mean like reviewers and people who are competitive. And then there are games that are just so far out that they're built for the mainstream, but then 1 out of every 4 people is gonna throw their controller into a wall, playing Dark Souls. So it really just is one of those things that's point 1, point 2. It really just depends on what you're playing and who's playing it and how this sort of an ideal is just, it's subjective, and it has to be subjective because that's just how it works. Not everyone is going to have the same experience. Not everyone is going to be able to throw Neo on their PC and basically go, I can be a samurai, only to watch their head get cut off 25 times before they, toss their $500 keyboard and mouse combo into a wall. So honestly, it's just, my thing about it is that I think that in general, that there are, coming from a point of being someone who isn't really in that part of the industry, it's just being a normal person who just plays the games and has enough time on their hands to basically say, hey, look, this is what I think is good, this is what I think is bad, and have a few people actually like the idea of what I'm saying. It's difficult because there are differences between, hey, this is a really good game, it's just really hard, and this is a really terrible game, no one should actually play it, it's hard because it's terrible. And it's, again, the problem is because everything becomes so subjective, it's really difficult for, column A and column B to not at some point just do this and intersect, and then everyone's like, but, and I'm like, it's really hard to say one way or the other. So you really, honestly, it has to boil down to, it's any kind of medium that you can deal with, be it video games, movies, television, books. It has to be subjective, and you have to take what person A and person B are saying at face value and then do it for yourself. Because if you don't experience it yourself, you only experience it through person A, who said it was terrible, and person B, who said it was actually the best gaming experience they've ever had. It's like, who do I actually believe? If I don't go out of my way to actually go and try it, or find a way to actually learn more about what it is that they're actually talking about, I think that probably you're gonna have a bad time.
Okay. I think it's at this point now we let Mark free.
So, I actually want to take a moment to climb up on my soapbox here and just, to the extent that it is possible to do so with an audience of about 8 people, once and for all, just take this whole Cuphead debacle conversation and just put it down. Just old yeller that shit, so that if anybody brings this up to you again, any of us, you know that they're wrong objectively. Okay? Can I take a moment to do that?
You have the floor, sir.
Okay. The first thing I want to note is the Metacritic scores for both Cupheads, because there's only two versions of it, the Xbox One version and the PC version. The Xbox One version has received 69 positive reviews and 3 mixed. The mixed reviews score in at a sum total of 70, 70, and 60 for the website Twinfinite. So out of 72 reviewers, 1 thought it was below 70. On the PC version of Cuphead, there are, Jesus Christ, 31 reviews, 30 positive, 1 mixed. The 1 mixed from a website known as Game Critics that I've personally never heard of. Everything else, of the 31 reviews, 30 of them think the game is good.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really anybody in the review circuit saying that the game is bad because it's hard. Like, it's just not happening. Further to the point, let's talk about that one video that everybody wants to shit on. That one video was basically Dean Takahashi playing the first stage of the game the first time it had been handed to him and fucking up the tutorial. Dean has been in video game journalism for 28 years. He has seen things that we will never see. He has written about things that we will never write about. And journalism in any genre is going to require people who have different perspectives on different things. I'm not even talking about from a difficulty perspective. Dean has written for sites like, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, and so on. He's a tech guy. I don't think he should be reviewing Cuphead necessarily, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. He played the first stage of it at a trade show, and he sucked at it, and he uploaded because he thought it was funny that he sucked at it. Like, Dean never reviewed it. Dean didn't even say it was bad. He said he thought it was good, and he openly acknowledged he was bad at it. People who are burying Dean for having an opinion on it, he really doesn't. He didn't review it. He just put up some video of him playing it. Anybody who says that what he did was in some way wrong, fuck them. They're objectively an asshole. But the most important thing here is, at the end of the day, people like Cuphead. A lot of people like Cuphead. Nobody really has anything bad to say about Cuphead from a difficulty perspective. But I have met people who can't play Cuphead. My friend Carl can't play Cuphead because he's disabled in a way that makes that game difficult for him to play. And here's the thing. If somebody comes in and they write something that says, like, this game can be difficult for a specific group or in specific circumstances, I think there's value in that. I don't think that there is value in shitting on a guy who played it, was bad at it, and put up a video to say, gee, I sure sucked at this, that was funny, I'm never going to review this game, so don't worry about it. Like, it comes back to the fact of people, like, giving shit to Arthur Gies for his footage of Doom of the Doom 2016 re-release, excuse me. Mm-hmm. The footage showed that he was pretty damn terrible at that game, and people dunked on him for being pretty terrible at that game in his first playthrough footage. Yeah, he gave that game an 8. Like, I don't think that the problem is that game reviewers are bad at games. Let's be clear, there are a lot of them who are bad at games. I'm definitely bad at some games. And I've written articulate reviews myself. The problem shouldn't be, is this writer any good at a game? It should be, is this writer capable of expressing themselves in a way that is compelling and that allows me to understand why they didn't like this game, and is their review going to be of value for me? Because you know what? I thought Arthur Gies was terrible in his introductory footage of Doom, but I also thought that his review was pretty good, and it told me that the game was worth buying and paying money for. I don't think it's of value necessarily to see how the hot dogs are made. I don't think there's value in knowing whether or not a reviewer is good at a game, so long as they can articulate their thoughts in a way that makes sense. If a reviewer just says the game is too hard and can't really illuminate their point any further than that, then you don't have to listen to that point. You know that person isn't expressing themselves well. But if they can express why this game is difficult or in what ways this game is challenging that are disagreeable, because there are plenty of games that have bullshit difficulty for no good reason, then I think that we should be able to understand that just because somebody says this game is difficult, it's not going to be for everybody, and maybe scores it a little lower. Okay, that should be reasonable. I do think that we need to tell all of these journalists to stop fucking comparing this shit to goddamn Dark Souls.
Please make it stop.
Well, like if
Crash Bandicoot.
Games that are
it's kind of like what you were saying, how, you know, if something is difficult for the experience, or something is difficult just because it's you know, there's no reason for it to be as difficult as it is, you know, it's bullshit difficult, whatever. But to me, that's subjective. Like, if you take somebody, and I'm just going to use Dean as an example. Like, obviously he was able to get past that training mode eventually, or the little training stage eventually. But if you take somebody who is legitimately not good at a game, and they play that Cuphead training stage, and if they can't get past it, are they going to be like, oh, this is bullshit difficult, this training stage shouldn't be that difficult? Where to me, I'm like, it's not hard, you're just bad at the game. You know what I mean?
That actually brings up a point I forgot to make, but I did want to make. Hey, Robert.
Yeah?
How old are you?
36.
Jan, how old are you?
37.
Dr. Dog, how old are you?
37.
I'm 39. All of us have played games like Cuphead.
Yeah.
There is entirely possible for somebody to be like 20 right now and to have never played a game like Cuphead in their life.
Pretty much.
But
Think
most of
about
those 20-year-olds aren't reviewing the game.
Well, no. Like, I want to be clear. I do think that reviewers do need to have a working knowledge of genres as a whole. I don't think reviewers need to have, you know, a shrink-wrapped copy of Earthbound in order to be able to, you know, illuminate their opinions on video games. But I do absolutely think that they need to have a working understanding of genres and how they work. Absolutely. But I do think that, you know, they need to be able to express that point. Like, if somebody just says that Cuphead's difficult and they say that it's bad because it's difficult, and they can't really express how it's difficult, then we should absolutely shit on them. Like, if Dean said, you know, basically, it's bad because I say it's bad, or it's bad because I suck at it, then yeah, fuck you. You're an idiot. You know, we shouldn't care what you think. But it's if the person can reasonably explain why they think it's unreasonably difficult in a way that we can understand, even if you disagree with it, so long as you can understand it, I think there's value there. It's if somebody expresses that this game is difficult in a way that we think, well, you know, I've played this kind of game before, I'm not going to think that this is unreasonably difficult. Like, I do think that, you know, if we can understand them and we understand the point that they're making, even if we disagree with it, we should be able to look at it and say, well, this review is clearly not for me because this doesn't seem like it'd be a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So here's a question though. So obviously reviews are subjective, and it really, as you said it, Mark, it's just yeah. Sorry, I'm having a brain fart right there. I had a thing to say, but okay. So question here is like, now going beyond Cuphead, because you know that wasn't really mainly the focus. That was just the example, and we kind of just ran off with it. But like,
well, it's because it's the most prevalent example.
It is the most prevalent.
Right now,
but then we also did have the Crash Bandicoot trilogy that came out, and that was yet another game compared to, you know, Dark Souls, and it was reviewed by a website that was pretty much, I forget the name of the website, but it was a European website. I do definitely know that didn't like the game because it was too difficult.
Can I just say, I don't mind the comparisons to Dark Souls, because that is essentially the hardest game in the modern gaming age. You know, like, if you were to compare it to, you know, Gradius 3, how many people are not going to know what that is? You know, if you were to compare it to Batman and Robin on Genesis, people are going to be like, what game is that?
Well, I do think that the problem is that it kind of shows a lack of ability to properly express yourself as an author.
Mhm.
Like the core issue to me is, as an author, you should be able to say, you know, this game is difficult, this game has challenge, not this game is the Dark Souls of platformers. Like, to me as a reader, if I see you compare something to Dark Souls because, like, as a shorthand for difficulty, if you compare it to get over, like, you know, the atmospheric storytelling or the aesthetics or the way that the world works, okay. If the only reason you're doing it is to say this game is difficult, like, I'm going to immediately question your ability to handle metaphor as a writer.
If I recall, I also saw when Monster Hunter World came out, people saying it was the Dark Souls of monster hunting or something like that. It was.
If anybody said that Monster Hunter World is the Dark Souls of that genre, they're wrong. Because
they
if
are.
anything,
Monster Hunter World is rather the easiest of the games, but
if anything, a lot of people are like, exactly. A lot
not
of
easiest,
people
but the
who are-
most accessible. I'm sorry, not easiest.
I wouldn't even say that. I mean,
Like, my thing is, like, when Mega 10 games first started coming out to the US, people the first couple of times compared them to Pokemon.
mhm.
And I was like, I get why you're doing that. I'm not happy about it, but I get why you're doing it. People who compare like, you know, Persona 5 or Strange Journey Redo to Pokemon at this point, no, fuck you. It's been 2 decades. Shut up. And, like, for me, like, that's where it gets is, you know, the first couple of years after Dark Souls came out, I get that comparison. But it's been like a decade at this point since the original Demon Souls came out.
Yeah, but I mean,
like,
the Dark Souls
as
3
writers, you should be able to expand the way that you express that point. You know, that shark has jumped itself at this point.
Well, as a critic and as somebody that has a team under him for movie reviews and that kind of stuff, I always tell my people, and the way I always write my reviews is, if I don't give this game or this movie a perfect score, you should be able to read my review and guess what that score is without looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you should be able to sit here and go, okay, he didn't like this, this was kind of okay, he gave this game, you know, 3 out of 5 or whatever. Like, you should be able to come close to that. If you can't, then I didn't do my job.
I agree with that 100%. I think that's great.
Mhm.
I believe
And, like,
Die Hard
think
Game Fan has that system in place,
reviewers
right?
have issues with that. Like, a lot of reviewers can't do that. A lot of reviewers will be like, oh, that this game was a 9.5 out of 10, but then, you know, give me, you know, this laundry list of, like, problems they had with it. Or they'll say, this is a perfect score. And then they'll be like, but I kind of didn't like this, and this was just okay. Well, then it's not perfect, is it? You know,
Right.
so I think that is a problem in modern reviewing. And maybe this is a whole different topic. But also, like you mentioned, the lowest Metacritic for Cuphead was in the 70s. You know, 7 out of 10 should be really good. You know, that shouldn't even be average.
Yeah,
Average should
that's
be 5 out of
that
10.
is
That's
another
not
topic
definitely
average.
a
right there.
conversation I would
Yeah.
love to have at some point. I think it's outside of our wheelhouse for this exercise, but that is definitely a conversation that I have many deep problems with.
Yeah,
I
because
believe-
literally, like if IGN gives something a 6.5, that's terrible. Like, no, 6.5 is actually pretty good on a scale of 1 to 10.
I believe
Yeah.
EGM is the only company out there in gaming publication that actually holds true to the 10 scale, where a 5 is still an average game in their review
And
system.
it's hard because since nobody else does, you assume if EGM gives it a 5 out of 10, even though that is a correct score for an average game, people are like, oh, this must be terrible. They gave it a 5 out of 10, and IGN gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, but then
in
you got
reality,
people-
those are the same score. It's just how IGN weights their score and how EGM weights their score.
But then you got people like Game Informer who kind of curve the grade a little bit by saying, oh, average game is somewhere around 7.
Yeah,
They're-
which is the whole problem. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that's probably that's a whole
topic.
topic.
Yep.
I have a big issue with that.
All right, so I would say we pretty much covered this pretty well. Is there any final thoughts on the topic before we move on to saying goodnight and revealing what the next episode will be about? Dog? Dr. Dog?
I don't really have anything else. Like I said, just the fact that most game journalists do suck, but the problem is most people suck at games. So it's difficult to find. Like, you can't just take people that are good at games and have them review. It's it's like what Mark said. As long as you can properly articulate the problems you have and the good points of that game, that's all that needs to really happen.
Okay, Mark, Jen, any final thoughts?
I got into an argument a while ago with a dude on Twitter who made the argument that there are a lot of people out there who could do this job better than current game journalists, and kind of sort of argued it in a way that I didn't think was particularly great, but whatever. The thing was, like, his argument was that there are a lot of people who are skilled at games who could do a good job of, writing about these things. And to me, my question always is, which would you rather have? Somebody who is good at games but not necessarily expressing themselves, or somebody who's good at expressing themselves but not necessarily at games? Now, his argument was, well, you can get people who are both, but my counterpoint is always, okay, find me those people. My thing is, if you can find somebody who is both good at games and good at expressing themselves, chances are they probably don't need your website. Chances are good that there's somebody like Chris Franklin or Hamish or Mitch Kramer, somebody who can do the sort of cult of personality type deal where they go on Patreon and they do their own thing and they make a lot of money, or somebody like Yahtzee or Sterling, to the extent that we would consider them to be good at games. I don't actually know if Yahtzee's any good at games or not, but whatever. Generally speaking, though, I'm going to want somebody who can express themselves more than somebody who's skilled at gaming. Because somebody who is good at playing games but not good at expressing themselves, you might love a game, but if you can't tell me why that game's good, why am I going to want to play that? If you can't tell me why a game's bad, why am I not going to buy it? Like, even if somebody sucks at games, if you're good enough explaining it, I can at least walk away and say, you know what? Even though you thought that game was terrible, all the stuff that you said about it didn't feel like it would be a problem to me, so at least I still know that this game is something I want to play, even though you didn't like it.
Like, I also think a really good example is Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like, I thought that game was bad, and everyone else thought it was amazing. And, like, the reasons why I thought it was bad were, the weapons constantly breaking, your stamina system where I could run for 5 seconds, then I got to walk, and then I run for 5 seconds, then I got to walk. Raining climbing when it was raining. Like, it felt like every time I was by a mountain, it started to rain. And I'm like, this is stupid. Why does this even happen? Because it's impeding my game progress for no reason. So, like, but stuff like that, people gave this game a perfect score. And I'm like, how do you give this game, like, if you can think it's good, that's fine, but you give it a perfect score when I see these glaring flaws. And I think a lot of people, especially game journalists, take a game like, oh, this is Zelda, they have this thing where it's Zelda, it starts at an 8. You know what I mean? Like, it can't go any lower than that.
I mean, to
be fair, I know people who absolutely love that game, even though, like, they weren't necessarily, like, they walked into it as objective as they could. For me personally, I read about that stuff that you're talking about, and I said, "Oh no," and I just didn't even buy it. So, listen, man, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that one.
But, like, that's the thing. Like, we're in the minority, and I'm like, how do you not see these things as problems? To me, like, the whole climbing, raining thing, that maybe is a minor. Well, no, that's not minor, because there are some things you have to climb, and if it's raining, you just gotta sit there and wait. It's stupid, but like, how can this weapon system, they've got all these different weapons in the game, and some of the weapons are really special, and you find them and you want to use them, but you can't because, in 10 swings, it's going to break. Like, what's the point of me having a special weapon if I'm afraid to use it because it's going to break?
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot more people kind of...
No, that's a big part of the game, and that's a problem, and that's a bad design choice, and people are still like, nope, 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's an above-average game. That's about it. I haven't played it in about a year.
Yeah, no, I haven't touched it since I got done working on it for Primo, which was probably like maybe 2 weeks after launch. I've beaten it, like, I've gone all the way through it because I had to, but I had it early, so it was, I played it for essentially about a month, and I'm like, I have no desire even to go back and play the DLC. Like, I've got no desire to do any of that because that game was frustrating to me, because I'm like, oh, I found this awesome weapon, I can't use it.
Okay. Well, Here's an idea. Now, I was talking about, let's say games that are too hard that, people gripe about. What about games that are too easy? Like Mario Odyssey. I thought that game was kind of insultingly easy.
Yep, that's also a problem. There's a lot of hand-holding in this generation, for example, one of the big things that hits me is Final Fantasy XI was one of my favorite games, as an MMO. And then Final Fantasy 14 comes out, and it's literally easy mode. And, it's played by a lot more people because it's easy mode. But to me, the game is terrible because I'm like, I don't want my game to be this easy.
Yeah, I'm actually in the opposite camp there. I get where you're coming from 100%, but it's...
Uh-oh.
No, it's for me.
If I wanted to play menus, the video game, I go back to playing Final Fantasy X.
Like, this is the thing. I played 11 and I played 14, and I invested, months of my life into both games.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, and I think this is probably where a lot of these games come from, like a lot of these changes come from. Years and years ago, we kind of had to make these games more challenging because there wasn't necessarily as much to them, and there was a certain expectation that they had to last a certain amount of time. So you would get your Castlevania that would probably last somebody 10, 20 hours, even though the actual game was like a half an hour to an hour long, because, that was all they could put in the game at that point. And now we're at the point where most of these games generally still last 6 to 10 hours, but it's, narrative following and collectibles and shit like that and whatever. I don't necessarily know whether one is better than the other, and I do definitely think that there is an argument to make games less easy. But for me, I think Final Fantasy 14, as much as I did love 11 when I played it, I think 14 respects my time more as a player, because I do think that there are options for if you want the game to be incredibly difficult. My core problem was I don't think 11 terribly respected my time, because I spent like a month camping the fucking crawler's nest trying to get my paladin up to level 50 just so I could do my first limit break quest, which was going to the bottom of 3 different difficult-ass dungeons, killing monsters for an ungodly amount of hours to get the 3 items that I needed to break the limit just so I could get another 5 levels and do that again. I legitimately feel like as much as I loved 11 did not respect the player's time in the way at which it chose to be difficult. Because again, you would be camping dungeons during the build-up for hours, days, and weeks.
What about that one boss battle in 11 that took literally almost 2 days just to beat him?
Well, okay, but hold on. To be fair, though, number one, I came in at the level 75 cap, so I didn't have to worry about a lot of those limit breaks.
Fair.
But to be fair, like that boss, that was completely optional.
Yes.
I played 11 for maybe 3 years, had every single class capped at 75, and I never once had any interest in doing that boss and never had to do any of the other in-game activities I would do. So that was literally, if you are a super hardcore player, it's like the ultimate weapons in other Final Fantasy games. Like most people aren't going to go fight the ultimate weapons, but they're there if you want to fight them.
Right, I think 14, the way that they do that is they have raids that are, post-game content and stuff like that.
Which are ridiculously mind-numbingly easy.
So I think this Final Fantasy...
Here's the thing.
Let's take that one offline.
Yes. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. How about if for a future show we have Brian versus Mark, Final Fantasy 11 versus Final Fantasy 14? How does that sound?
I don't feel like that's fair, because I feel like Jan is probably going to end up getting in on that too, since Jan and I both play.
Okay, Mark, you can have a handicap. Jan can be in your corner.
Look. I've been playing MMOs for about as long as I've owned computers, so I am probably not the best person to have in that corner, because that is basically my drug of choice. So to say that one game is better than the other is basically a pros and cons conversation, because while 11 did a lot of things really well, it also did a lot of things really bad. The same thing goes for 14. While it does do a lot of things really well, it does a lot of things really bad as well. MMOs as a genre have that pro-con problem, and there isn't any specific MMO that is going to break that mold anytime soon, because of the fact that some MMOs have tried certain other aspects, while others have tried to follow the EverQuest/WoW mold, and unfortunately, you just sort of start seeing a lot of the similarities coming out a lot of times, and you're going to end up seeing it's either way too hard and it's more for the hardcore MMO players, or it's way too easy and it's built for the casual MMO players. And that's where this conversation's kind of going. And it's like, I will direct you to the MMO conversation that myself and Mark had on his Neo Kobe Pizza podcast a few months ago. That is a conversation that is not something you can just say over a couple hours and some pizza. That is like a full-on episode. It is a full-blown conversation to basically say, hey, look, I can pit 8 different MMOs up all against each other and tell you which of these are great and which of these are not. And the problem is again, it's purely subjective on where you are on this. I loved 11. I spent enough time on 11 that it got me away from EverQuest when I ended up then going to WoW and then moving to 14. So honestly, I've played them all. I've seen them all. I know what I'm talking about, but I also understand that there's going to be people in camps that are like, I would prefer my experience to be much more old school versus I like the accessibility of the newer stuff, and I think that this is the way to go going forward. So,
by the way, if you're just tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, we are actually at the end of the show, and the last topic of conversation somehow evolved into MMORPGs, which is perfectly fine because I was really enjoying the conversation just listening to these people talk.
That said, I would be interested in doing that for fun.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I would be
nothing
okay
is
doing
for
that
fun.
for
Everything is serious now.
I would love to
That's why I'm
actually
staying
have.
up after midnight to play BlazBlue, of course.
Actually, I would love to actually have a future episode where we just talk about MMORPGs. In fact, I think we've never had a topic where we talked about MMORPGs, to be truthfully honest, on this show. Even when it was just the podcast GVN Radio. So the show is winding down now. So before we say adieu, I would like to see if anybody would like to plug anything that they're doing, both on Twitter, on their streams, videos, podcasts, whatever. Let's start with you, Brian. Do you have anything you'd like to plug?
I mean, not really. You can find most of my work on primagames.com and the YouTube channel that's associated with Prima Games. Most of my stuff goes there. So if you want to look, you can. I mean, usually if you Google a problem on a game I'm working on, Prima's usually page 1 because all we do is strategy guides. So I don't really plug anything. It's just kind of like, yeah, if you have this problem, you're probably going to read one of my articles at some point or another.
Okay, now where would we go to see your reviews on movies?
That's at Geek News Network. So it's geeknewsnetwork.net, or you can just Google Geek News Network and you'll see my movie reviews on there.
Okay. Jan, anything you would like to plug at all?
I'm going to be doing BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle tonight once it comes live on PS4. I'm trying to get a microphone because my video capture card for consoles is officially dead. So I have to get a new one for that before I can actually do real streams. But I will be attempting to do some streaming of BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle tonight. Other than that, normal Fridays, Saturdays, I am starting to work on getting a couple of additional days on my actual stream schedule, so twitch.tv/Remind. Other than that, no, not really. I mean, it's pretty much just same old.
By the way, I believe it is your turn to pick the game for the next video game book club, and I believe we said we were going to reveal that tonight. So,
I did, and I actually am going to, so we'll let Mark do his thing, and then we'll go to book
all right,
club.
so before we come back to you, Mark, please, do you have anything you would like to plug?
Not at the moment. I'm still kind of working through a bunch of different stuff. Taking a week off for the rest of this week. I'm going out to LA to hang out with a couple of people. Not going for E3 related stuff, just going to hang out. Then after that, I'm going to try and see if I want to bring some stuff back together. I don't know yet, but we'll see.
Okay.
You're going to go see Hamish and Nico, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Did we still want to try and do the live E3 press conference show on the next Monday, Tuesday, or is that something that we'll just talk about?
If you want to do it, I'm fine with it. We can work it out.
Live reaction.
Which specific ones are we going to do? Because I would.
Well, it's whatever I'm available to see. To be
deal with
truthfully
that.
honest, I think Sony
Let's
is.
discuss that after.
Yeah, we'll discuss that after the show. All right, so to officially end the show, Jen, please tell us the game for our next video game book club.
So today's topic was sort of something that I was kind of like, okay, this makes sense to me. And having the idea of games that are hard that got reviewed badly because of that, or people just weren't paying attention, or games that in general just tend to fly under the radar because of the fact that maybe they're popular, but maybe they don't get it, or they have a lot of positive reviews, but not a lot of people know about it because they don't get the press. I am not a huge Metroidvania kind of person, but I saw a lot of what they were doing with this one specific game, and I really kind of was just like, okay, this actually seems like something that I'd actually get in and enjoy. And I've been enjoying a little bit of it. I started playing it for a couple hours on stream over the weekend, and that game is Iconoclasts. This is a fun little sort of indie Metroidvania pixelated 2D style platformer game that I saw the characters and I kind of instantly fell in love with them. It has a really interesting kind of deeper storyline than I actually anticipated, so I'm actually kind of really interested in actually seeing more about what actually happens in the game as far as the story is concerned. So I think that would be a really fun kind of idea of, this is a game that I think that didn't get a lot of press. It kickstarted and got picked up really quick because of the artists that actually did the pixelated graphics for it, that actually did the character concepts. And I'm actually really kind of excited to see more of the actual game, which is something that I can honestly say that I haven't had that real push or that drive to actually see a game all the way through for a really long time. So to have something like this, just this little, not even on the radar Indiegogo Kickstarter Metroidvania kind of game pick up and kind of just be like, oh hey, this is the thing that you should do. And I've enjoyed it since I started it, so I think that this would be something for all three of us to get together and really get a chance to play it a little bit more and sort of see what everyone's idea is on this game.
And what platforms can we pick this up on?
I know that it's on Steam.
Okay, that sounds good. I can definitely access that.
Yeah, so Steam's probably the easiest way to get a hold of it.
All right.
I'm actually...
So our next show is going to be June 18th, so we shall definitely have our next video game book club right then and there, talking about this game. What is it called? Iconoclast?
Iconoclast. Yes.
All right, and definitely something to look forward to. So in regards to me, to plug anything, there is going to be no 3 Vets and a Noob this Wednesday for my stream. There will be no Game Jam tomorrow night. I'll just randomly stream whatever it is I feel like playing. Probably some Terra, probably some Monster Hunter. I have yet to really hop on and fight the new monster, Teostra, or
Lunestra?
Lunestra, sorry, yeah. So I'm definitely looking to try and fight this monster, who I hear is giving so many people hissy fits.
She's a little blue toast.
I hear she's a bitch.
But yeah, so Iconoclast is Steam, GOG, and PlayStation 4.
Okay, so PlayStation 4. That sounds good. All right, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I want to thank you, Jan. I want to thank you, Mark, for always being a part of the show. Brian, thank you once again for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll see you plenty more times to come.
Thanks for having me.
And to everybody out there, thank you, and good night. Oh, no.
You already went off the air, didn't you?
Oh, right. No, I did not go off the air. And,
good, you're not up the air. So
okay, who am I rating? Who am I rating tonight, Mark?
Same person,
Okay.
Mr. Pure Instinct.
Mr. Pure Instinct. So some of you who were probably here
think
last week
I can
were
do it.
talking about it. We didn't get a chance to last time.
I think I got it.
We're gonna go ahead and raid
I don't
Mr.
know.
Pure Instinct.
I just did that.
Nice.
All right, so with that,
He's doing stuff for charity again this week. He's playing Overwatch for charity, actually. So,
Okay.
if you guys can say hi when we get in there, that'd be appreciated.
all right, so thank you, everybody.
Just say, hey, GVN says love you, and we'll go in there from there. So
Okay, so I end the show and the stream will go there, right?
It just goes. You don't even have to end. Just wait and it'll go.
All right, everybody, you have a good night. Thank you.